Ariza. Recording is a go, allegedly. So hopefully it's working. Otherwise, it's gonna be somewhat embarrassing when I try and upload a YouTube
Got a
video.
notice saying it's recording. So
yeah, perfect. So probably going to be a little bit less formal here. I don't really know like where everyone's at on the assignment. But I guess before we dive into assignment 3, the timing of these chats. I think it was floated Thursday morning on either Teams or WhatsApp. Does that work for the both of you? And then if it does, then we can push for it to Mona and Ashish as well.
Yeah, it works for me.
okay. I think I can't remember who, but I thought I saw someone mention they might have had a conflict with a class on Thursday morning, and they mentioned Wednesday. I just have Wednesday. I have a 10:30 to 11:20, but my Thursday is available too. So Thursday I only have 3:30 to 4:20 for class. So I have both those days are pretty open.
Wednesday,
I just couldn't remember. I think in the WhatsApp I saw someone make a chat comment about the Thursday, but I don't know if they made it all day. I think they might have just referenced the morning for availability. So because you have a class, Jason?
Yeah, I have a class on Wednesday mornings.
Okay.
Oh yeah, Mona says she has class on Thursday morning. She has 2 of them. What about are we all in the same Math 175 lecture on Thursday at
3:30? I think
3:30?
so.
Yeah.
Do we want to just start the day a little bit earlier there and go from
Do it right before?
Yeah, 2:30 to 3:30.
Yeah.
Try and schedule something there.
Yeah.
On Thursday.
That'll work. Like 2:20, start up 2:25. You know what I mean? So we have a couple minutes or whatever. Yeah, that works good.
Okay.
So we'll propose that. It might be a busy day for Mona because it sounds like she has 2 classes on Thursday and then 3 classes on Friday.
Yeah, I mean, I still have flexibility. Like my class load isn't heavy, so all my days I could probably find a time. So I'm pretty open.
Me as well. It's only the weekends that get a little bit busier for me, and the evenings. And I don't really want to steal anyone's nighttime.
No, and for me, the only reason for weekends I can make work okay, but evenings it's the same thing. It's my son. Like I pick him up from daycare by 5, so it'd be hard. And my schedule's like 2 to 3, so each week it's a 2-week rotation, so it's not the same each week. So it'd be hard to set a time.
Yeah. So let's aim for during the day, Wednesday right now, or Thursday. Sorry, the 2:20 to 3:20 slot before our Math 175 lecture. And if that works for Mona and Ashish, then great. We'll do that going forward.
Sounds good.
Sweet. So how's everyone feeling for assignment 3? I know, Amina, you're pretty far along, I think, based on what I was seeing on Teams yesterday. And I think, Ryan, you're like halfway through.
About half, yeah. Amina, are you done?
I'm still I'm still at the same point, like 8 questions left.
Okay, so you're on 10 or 10 or 11?
Finishing. No, I just like I didn't go in order, so I skipped some questions and
I'm gonna have to do that too because I've gotten like just stuck on one for a while.
Difficulty, so I just go to the next question.
Yes, that's smart. I've been like getting it. I don't even want to say stuck, but you know what I mean? Like I enjoy looking at it. So I'll just get lost looking at the code for like an hour. And then I'm like, I need to move on from this. Like
I can't take 1 hour on one question.
Yeah, well, especially when, like, I hate to say it, but when I know it's so important. It's like Jason and I talked about it. This is the most important course probably for our whole program. But like when you look at the time commitment and on the assignments and the percentage out, it's like, oh man. Like even the quiz was so much easier marks, I think we got like, I don't know, 1 or 2% for that quiz, and it was like 10 minutes.
Less than 1%.
Oh, okay. Yeah, they're like 0.8 or something, eh?
But I mean, at the same time, the quizzes felt easy because dumped so much time.
Because we've done other stuff. Yeah. You know what though? Did you guys try and understand
The for loop
code
at the
without
beginning?
running it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you understand it before you ran it?
I knew how to read it.
Okay.
It was like with the time, because I saw it was the first question. I'm like, oh god, if they're all like this, I can't invest the effort to try and read it.
Yeah.
But then after I finished the other questions, I went back and kind of parsed it through.
Yeah, that was the same for me. Like I tried to read it and I guessed, and then I did the other ones, and then I went back and I used the compiler to check it. And luckily I was right, but it was more of a guess. It wasn't like I was confident in how I had come up with my answer, you know?
Yep. But anyway, so I don't want to take up too much time because you guys do still have stuff for assignment 3. The prof did say, or Reza did say, we're not supposed to share code or anything like that. So I guess like first steps, like how are you guys approaching, like, are you guys finding it difficult? Because I was speaking with Ashish last night on this, and he was like, I'm trying to do this, but I can't figure it out. And it got me thinking on like, how are you guys approaching the problem, right? Like, are you just seeing like, let me share my screen. How do I share? Oh, here it is. Not this one, this one.
Figure out the screen share.
Yeah, so I'm sharing my screen. Hopefully it's visible.
Yeah.
Perfect. But like, are you guys just, you see, write a program that allows a user to enter 2 integers and character. If the character is A, add the 2 integers, and you're just going like straight, like, all right, I need to get an integer number.
I started doing, sorry to interrupt, but I started doing what you had kind of given me the guidance on, where I copy my question over into my Word document, and then when I come into my compiler, I write my input comment. And depending on the complexity of the problem, I might even like write a couple notes on a piece of paper being like, okay, where do I have to introduce variables? Try and get a bit of a framework. And then like go section by section and run. I run section by section now, rather than I used to write, because like, I have issues with the compiler. I don't get very much error detection with the way that I'm running them. They don't run very often. Now, every time I just reload the page because that makes it run. But because of that, I find what you were saying is going section by section, run it. And then when you have issues, comment out from bottom up, and then you can find, like that's what I tried to do for, I think it was Anish yesterday. He had posted his code, and all I did was change his using class static void to include like the strings arg or whatever. And I don't know if that, but all I did was just tried that, and it at least allowed me to compile the first line. So I was like, I think I might have changed to integer to double or something like that. But you know what I mean? Like it helped me see how I could start to troubleshoot, not even my own, but even for someone else's. So I found it helpful. It's helped me learn what I'm writing versus just being like looking at my last question and being like, okay, console write. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. No,
like I did my first assignment.
Yeah. What about you, Amina? Are you sort of just trying to puzzle it out as you're like, are you trying to code the answer while trying to figure out how to do the answer?
So first I just try to understand the question and like try to see like if this is this, then like for the requirement, what is the answer about the requirement? And then after that, like, yeah, I just try to make the code. And then if it doesn't work, I try to like define the errors and stuff. And to make the code work with the question, like to give me an output that goes with the question.
Relevant, yeah. When you run into issues in your code, do you use like the comment out for lines?
Yeah.
Have you tried? Okay, yeah, nice.
So my code, like it gives me like a line, maybe if there's an error, before I go on, there's like a red line underneath.
Yeah, it shows you. I don't get that.
That's because you're still using the online compiler. Right? Once you get set up on like either Visual Studio or VS Code, it makes troubleshooting a lot easier because it'll give you actual
And
error
also they give
messages.
you the error number maybe, and I
Yep.
search it through Google and it tells me like what's the error number is all about.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's super helpful.
I have a desktop, as I explained to you, but because it's funny, because it was set up as a minor, it's not running like a proper Windows. So I have to, it was funny. I got it on, it's direct linked to my modem. It was on the internet. I ran the updates and now it won't connect to the internet. So I'm like,
Oh,
I need to get someone over here who knows how to fix this thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I can at least like, it's a bit more difficult, but it's probably good for my learning sake. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I mean,
it's very slow, but
it builds good habits as well, to be honest. Like I did the first couple assignments, I think, in the online compiler, because I hadn't bothered to figure out how to set up Visual Studio.
Yes. Yeah.
And you learn real quick the importance of like proper capitalization, remembering your semicolon, and all of that fun stuff. When after you've wasted 15 minutes going through line by line, you're like, where the heck is going wrong? So I think it's made me a better, sort of more consistent programmer, and able to write code that at least syntactically is correct the first time. But what
Amina, I was just going to ask, Amina, do you have any experience in programming before our course?
No, nothing.
No. Okay. And so C#, it was the first time you'd seen it as well.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah, no, that's awesome. You're doing really good. And you've got, I can hear a little one in the background.
Yeah, I've got three kids.
Oh, wow. Good for you. That's, I can't imagine trying to do that and do school. That's good for you. I've got one 50% of the time and it's a lot of work.
Awesome. So I think, does it make sense? Because I don't really know how to structure these sessions, but does it make sense to kind of walk through sort of one of these without code, but like using pseudocode instead? Just to make sure that we're all on the same page in terms of, at least in my opinion, how I've been approaching these and finding them successful, or finding success to break down the problem into its actually kind of similar to what the COMP100 prof was saying today, breaking down the problem into smaller pieces.
Chunks.
Because once you have it into smaller chunks, then you can figure out what are the tools that you need to use to achieve it.
And I was even making notes when he was writing that, and this is something you had talked to me about too, is like, don't write your code to be rigid. If you can make it kind of liquid or flexible, so it's less terms defined strictly, they're more, it's almost more of a template that you could then save and apply to other things as well, right?
Yeah, for sure. So are there any questions that both of you haven't done? I'm not going to do 18 because 18 is an absolute nightmare.
Yeah, and he gave us kind of a bit of an idea. I don't know if I'm going to spend, I love it. It was like, it's a fun hour. I was like, oh my Lord.
It's.
How long did it take you to do 18?
About an hour.
Okay. He kind of showed us at the end of class. He gave us a bit of an example. I mean, did you see that?
Yeah.
Okay.
I had to rewrite the code for 18 from scratch 3 times in order to get it to work. Because it's just a convoluted problem.
It's just a ton of if else, like if else if with all the different combination options.
Pretty much, yeah. Like there's.
Because he had showed like A equals this, B equals this, C equals this, and then you have to go through like each thing and be like, okay, they could have got that. They could have got
21 different permutations possible.
Oh my God. I am going to write that down.
I actually had to write out each potential
permutation.
I was
going to say, I just want to know, now that I know that number, I know how many I should expect to see.
At least I found 21.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, that's what when I was looking at it in all the columns and the way he was explaining it, I was like, how many options are there like that? Because that's what you have to do is you need a code line for basically every single one.
Yeah.
How long was your section of code?
About number 17.
Sure. Yeah, we can talk about 17. Ryan, have you done 17?
No, but I don't mind. That's fine. I don't mind looking at it. I might ask you after briefly about 8, because I just don't understand how they want you to approach it with a nested statement, because my approach was completely like just using not nested, and I couldn't understand the logic of why I would need to use nested based on me using just the character they select. Like I was like, if I had another thing I needed to use, but yeah, I'll ask Jasper. Let's look at 17.
No worries. Yeah, so Mike, actually for 18, just to answer your question, my code is 120 lines long.
Wow. So how many pages is that though in your Word document?
I haven't pasted into Word yet. It's just sitting in VS Code.
You're like probably 2 or 3.
Potentially.
2?
Yeah. There's a bunch of white space in here as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, about 120 lines long.
Because I've been trying to keep my code solutions to like a page, but I've been noticing I've had to shrink my font down to like 10.5. I'm like, this isn't going to work much longer.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so 17. So in terms of approach, what I typically try and do is almost rephrase sort of what's being asked of us, right? So I mean, obviously we all know what rock paper scissors is, hopefully. I think we maybe we'll cover it in COMP100 next week if y'all aren't familiar with the game.
Yeah, sounds like it with the way he's approaching things. Explain it to me like I know nothing about computers.
Yeah, but so we have sort of a concept that we're all familiar with, right? You know, you have 3 options that you can use, and you're playing with the computer, which will also give you 3 options, and then you have to compare the 2 and see who wins, right? So, you know, breaking it down into its component parts, you know, what's the, you know, in my mind, and I'll just walk through sort of how I approach it, and then maybe you guys can chime in if you're like, oh, this doesn't make sense to me or whatever. Yep. But I have, you know, firstly, I need to figure out how to, and is the screen size okay? Can you see what I'm
oh yeah.
Okay, perfect. How to get the user to choose an option, right? So that's obviously the first step, because rock, paper, scissors, you have to get stuff from our user. And then the second is to figure out how to get the computer to choose an option. And again, it's rock, paper, or scissors. How we're going to do that, I'm going to leave that till later. I'll figure that out when I get there.
Yeah.
And then, you know, compare the 2 choices and see who wins. Report who wins, right? And if you think back to like
I'm just gonna take screenshots. Don't mind me.
Yeah, no worries. This is recorded as well. I can actually I'll maybe put timestamps after I upload it, and I'll share the video with everyone. If we want to.
You don't have to, but I'm just gonna take a couple photos because I find this is useful. Like just seeing your process, I probably will when I get stuck, you know, just try and kind of look at it this way. Come back to the start and.
And like if we think back, like this is pretty much like a very simple IPO that we had covered in, you know, weeks 1 and 2, right? You have your inputs. Well, you have your input, which is the user option choice. We have some processing, which is getting the computer to choose an option, comparing the 2 options, and then our output is the winner, right? So again, this is, you know, we're breaking this however long, you know, these 2 paragraphs into things that are a little bit easier for us to understand. And then for each of these steps, you know, I started thinking like, how do I get information from our user? What are the tools that I know right now related to, you know, getting a user to put stuff in? And easy question to the group.
Console right.
Yeah. So we have the 2, right? We have the the combination of the two. So console write, which would print something to the user.
And then accept the variable and designate it or whatever.
Read line.
And our read line is basically, yeah, like getting the computer to, okay.
Yeah, accept something. And generally speaking, you have to have, sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, so console read line and then, yeah, accepting the variable. I don't want to say it's similar to, but it's almost similar to if you just introduce a variable up above, like you have the int num a. Like you're introducing that to the computer, but this is like you're taking it from the user instead of I'm giving you this thing at the top as like a static input.
So yes, I think my understanding is a little bit different. So for me, how I've kind of
it's just declaration at the top.
Exactly. So this tells the program that I have a variable called num a.
And this is what it is.
Store that in memory, and now I have a box that's called num a, and it's supposed to contain an integer.
And it's like more rigid, whereas down below is like user input variable.
So it's the same level of rigidity. Right now it's a blank box. So like if we did console dot write num a right now.
Yeah, it's especially if,
oh dear.
Especially if you give it, it's like
I don't know if maybe it's you can't have nulls.
Right line. Is it right line? No, I guess not right line down below.
Oops. You might not be able to have nulls in
as an integer, but no, I get what you mean. It could be as rigid if you still use the same box to contain it. Like if you still accept it and define it as an integer, it's still as rigid. I just meant more like something we provide versus user provides, I guess.
Well, so the idea is here you create the box, and then later on, now the box exists, you can do whatever, right? You can
use
put
it in calculation or whatever.
Equals 2. So it's still changeable.
Yeah, okay, I see. And so even without separating, so because that's one thing I was curious about is so how you define num a 1, 2, 3 in 3 successible lines. So as you go down through the code, it's just going to take the most previous definition that you've made, unless it's been overwritten by like a convert to or something.
So it will always take the most recent definition.
Okay. That was something I was curious about for declarations.
I see. Yeah. So once you've like, basically, you can think about it kind of like you have the box, and I've shoved the number 1 into the box here, and then when I put the like num a equals something else, it just dumps out the box and puts something new in. And so long as it's still an integer, so long as it follows the type of variable that I've declared earlier on, I can do basically whatever the heck I want.
Because the reason I ask is because almost, I was doing things like that within if statements, and you know how they have the curly bracket things. I just wasn't sure, like, does it need to be within that, or is this like I did, you know what I mean? I didn't know if it needed that, but that is good clarification for me at least.
Yeah.
Like I say, a lot of this stuff to me is like, it's completely new. So I'm pretty, gaining a better understanding is important.
Yep. No, and that's perfectly fair. The other thing I think I heard you mention is, whether convert to has any bearing, right? The idea is like the convert to statement just replaces the variable that, or the number that we want to put in, right? So if we did num a equals convert to int 32 console.read line, just to break down how this statement works, is actually the way it executes is there's kind of 3 steps in it. And Amina, I'm not sure if this is like stuff that you already know. We'll move on relatively quickly, but I do want to make sure that this is understood.
Sorry, yeah.
But so the first thing that happens is order of operations, what's in the internal brackets. right? So we have the console, the first thing is console read line. And this is what lets us enter something into the computer, right? So if we just have like a basic console read line, all it does is it just, if it compiles, yeah. So all it does is just kind of sits there, right? It just waits for
something,
anything, right?
Can I ask, what's the difference between console.write and write line?
Yes, that's something I don't really get either.
Sure.
I'm glad I'm not the only one who has these kinds of questions. Because I use them both, but I really read and read line I understand better, but write and write line is more foreign to me.
Yeah. So the difference is, and I'm going to try and throw an example here together. So, oops, no, I messed up. This needs to be console write.
That's when mine always goes on me. I have to reload it.
Write line. Okay. So you can see when we have a write line, it introduces a line break after the 3.
Gotcha.
So we have 2 write lines, so we have a line break. But then when we do the write, it does not have the line break.
That's the only.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. And that's the same with read and read line?
Potentially. I haven't actually tried whether read is is an actual function. I've always been using read line.
Yeah.
But we can try.
Sorry, I don't even think have I ever even used read? I don't know if I've ever even used that in a.
Yeah. But we can try.
I'm sure it has a function, or no, it has a read only comes up, I guess, eh?
I'm not sure.
Like for autofill or whatever, I noticed that sometimes comes up for it.
But yeah, so like what we were saying earlier, the read line just kind of sits there, right? It doesn't do anything, and you can type whatever the heck you want, and it'll just take it and then forget it, essentially. So our first step of having the read line here in our overarching sort of num a equals convert to int 32 just takes in an input and stores it temporarily in memory. But if we don't use it subsequent to that, like if we don't use it within that single line of code, it's going to get forgotten and dumped and whatever, right? Which is why we wrap it in the convert to int 32 function. So this is basically saying, like the order of operations is saying, all right, I'm going to take an input and store it temporarily. And then that input, I'm going to try and convert it to an integer, right? And then after all that,
teaching class.
Sorry?
I said you should help him teach class.
No. And then so after it's converted it to an integer, then we're back like, so the, if we look at this as an actual sort of example, the first one is convert to read line to 32, and then we replace the console read line with the string that we entered. Say we put in 32, and then convert to int fires and converts the 32. The 32 gets converted into an actual number, 32. And then we're back to the same sort of format as this, right? Where we're back to num a equals 32. So that's kind of the logical progression of like what this thing is actually doing, right? It's not one block of code.
So is that what you're supposed to do in that question?
No, so this is just an example of like the inner function, like how
what those lines and terms mean.
Yeah.
Yeah, generally. We can go into 17 now if you want. We're taking up too much of Jason's time making him lecture us.
No
I'm
worries.
just kidding. I'm kidding.
But that's
it is useful though. It's very useful.
It does,
like, even
it
that
does
is
lead
helpful.
into our understanding of
this question
of numbers of this question, right? Because oftentimes I think a lot of folks will come in and they'll have learned that, oh, when I need to get an input from our user, it's a convert statement with a readline statement, irrespective of what we're trying to do, right? But if we look back at our requirements here, so we're going back to figure out how to get the user to choose an option, and our options are R, P, or S, right? So immediately there, we know that we don't necessarily need to convert it to an integer.
Is 16 and 17 one question then?
Yeah,
or they
16 and 17 are the same.
Oh, okay.
16 teaches us how to play rock, paper, scissors, and 17 is actually the thing we need to do.
Gotcha.
So what we were saying earlier is, we need to prompt for the choice, and then we need to store the choice. And as we said earlier, we have console.write, give me your choice, and then we have say user choice equals the console.readline, right? And again, as Brian was saying, we should be testing this and making sure that it works. And obviously mine did not work. I'm not sure why.
But is it because it's going to be a string output? Like, do you need your convert?
No, it's not that, but it's very similar concept, right? Okay. You can see here that I'm trying to put a console read line into the user choice box. But
you didn't define it.
Exactly. I didn't say what the user choice box is going to be.
Mm-hmm. Which you could put up at the top, or you could just put it with user choice, right?
Exactly. So you can either do string user choice here, or I can just do string user choice at the top, so that I know the box. Mm-hmm. I don't know which is preferred by Reza.
I feel like single line code is like, if you can put it in the.
I mean, you can always put it down here.
A bunch again,
Even if you're using it a bunch again, you only need to declare it once. Mm-hmm. Personally, I've actually preferred to throw it at the top.
Declaring, okay.
Just so that I basically declare all of my variables at the top.
That's one thing I was running into, is like, where should I add these always? I didn't really know if that would affect it, but you explaining it makes sense, but the sequential ordering is helpful.
Yeah, it doesn't impact how the program runs. But personally, I find it easier just to keep track of everything.
For you to write it too, right now.
Yeah. So we get the choice. It's gonna come in as you either have rock, paper, or scissors in the format of R, P, or S, right? And then probably the harder part here is really trying to figure out how to get the computer to choose an option, right? So I guess posing the question to you guys, and Ryan, this might be a struggle for you because you haven't done the earlier questions.
Well, some of the one that I'm on actually is like a character-based one, so I think even this will be helpful.
Okay,
because like the way I see it is you're trying to accept something from them that's probably going to be read as potentially string or character, or probably string, but then you need to convert it to character.
Yeah.
For the computer.
The difficult part is really how do we get the computer to choose an option? Right. Yeah. Because we need to compare the user's choice of RPS, which we all know how to get now, with how do we get the computer to choose an option? So I guess, Amina, have you, I think you brought this up, so I assume you've kind of looked at this a little bit.
Yeah. So what I'm thinking is, so you make the computer choose a random choice between rock, paper, or scissors.
Mm-hmm.
So my question is, like, I know how to make the computer choose a random number. Like if you're told like between 1 and 7, between 1 and 6,
mm-hmm.
like how you put the numbers like 1 to 7, 1 to 6. But
Yep.
how do you put the like a character? Like you can say rock to scissors. So do you have to put rock, paper, and scissors in all the random characters?
Mm-hmm. So you're very close, right? You're definitely on the right track. With getting the computer to choose a random number. And Ryan, for your reference, this is covered on question 15, where we're using Reza gives us sort of the code that we can just copy and paste in.
Okay.
Which is fantastic.
Yes. Especially when there's 18.
Yeah,
or
yes.
17, I guess.
But then the question is, how do we get from a random number to rock, paper, scissors, right, Amina?
Yeah.
So if we think back to either the class on Friday or the class last week, one of the activities that we did was user enters a number between 1 and 4, and then we print winter, spring, summer, fall, right? Do you remember that?
Yeah.
So how can we combine the two concepts together?
Okay, we can say maybe, so we ask the computer to enter a random number, maybe between 1 and 3.
Yep.
And then if the computer chooses like 1, we say it is rock. Or maybe if the computer chooses 2, it is paper, or if it chooses 3, it is scissors.
Exactly.
Okay.
And like you say, that example from a lecture where he talked about it pretty much shows you how to kind of
so you simply choose a random number, but then on your if statement, that's what you say. Okay.
Yeah, and that's how I approached it. There might be an easier way
but for number 16, I think there is no computer, so you have to choose 2 players and like 2 users. There are 2 users who have to give the options, not the computer.
Oh,
right?
So that's the difference between 16 and 17.
Well, and that was what I was wondering. Like, does he want it to be 2 separate questions, or is it just the first one you're writing your code and your second one you're running it?
No, it's.
But I see what you're saying, Amina. Like they are 2 different questions. Yeah, your first one you have to have 2 inputs from 2 players. So like first input user, second input user.
That makes sense. I'm gonna have to actually do question 16.
Modify yours then, yeah. It sounds like if you've already done 17 though, you should be okay.
Yeah, it
might be tricky. Might be tricky though.
It's just change a couple of variables. But yeah, no, exactly. I think, Amina, you have the right of it, right? The computer chooses 1, 2, or 3, and then we convert that number to rock, paper, or scissors, and then now we can compare the, going back to 16. If a user had chosen rock, we do the whole, the series of if statements to kind of see who wins. And then we just print out who wins. Does that make sense? Like how we took that question of choose a random option, and we broke it into like essentially 2 different parts, right? We have the number, and then we have the conversion.
For number 17, how do we compare who wins? Like, is it the same as number 16?
I would assume so. I'd assume it's be very similar because it's just instead of using the choice of player B, we're now using the choice of computer.
Yeah.
Right. I assume rock, paper, scissors isn't going to the rules of rock, paper, scissors isn't changing between 16 and 17.
Okay.
The one thing I was just going to ask for clarification for me as well. So when it's 2 players and 3 variables, from a combination standpoint, mathematics, it's like 3 raised to the power of 2, so there's 9. Like you'd have 9 options basically. Or does it work out not quite to be 9? But 9?
It is 9, yeah. Because you can have rock and scissors, rock and papers, and then
I just wanted to make sure in my mind, like, you know what I mean? Like the math, thinking of it that way, at least in this circumstance, lines up.
Yeah, I fairly certain. Yeah, there should be 9 different permutations. And if you guys want to, the other thing that we can start thinking about, like once we have this logic set up, is how can we make it a little bit more elegant or a little bit faster? Because what we could do is we could write 9 different if statements, like Ryan was saying, right? And we can do if player A is rock and player B is rock, then it's a tie. And then we can tie. And then we can do another one. Player A is rock.
Yeah, I don't want to do that.
Player B is paper.
Yeah.
And then like times 9, right? Which is a massive pain. And very inefficient for the program.
Is that where you use switch or?
So you could use a switch.
Or you nested statements.
Exactly, nested ifs, right? Because then you can do if player A is rock, and then you have the code block, and it's like, and then if player B is rock, tie. Player B is paper, loss, et cetera, et cetera.
Shorter.
And
So
this
how
could be
about
like,
how do you make the players choose only those 3 things? Like, how do you tell them, like, you just have to choose rock, paper, or scissors? What
that's
another thing.
That was another thing I was curious about too.
So basically enforcing a choice.
So do you write like in the console to try to write like enter rock, paper, or scissors, or?
Yeah, that's how I approached it. I asked them, I prompted for specific inputs, right?
Okay.
So I was like, give me R, P, or S.
Okay.
Right? And if you want to get fancy, you can have an initial sort of statement, where you can be like, so you prompt for choices, you store the choice, but then you can be like, check if the choice is valid, right? So again, leveraging stuff that we know, and how would we check if something is valid?
Give it a range or like, I'm trying to think.
Well, what tool would we use? Like what type of code would we try? Would it be a console write, a console read,
console read,
an if statement? So right now we have a variable, say car A or player A equals Z, right? What can we do to player A to check if it is one of the ones that we want, which is R, P, or S?
You could use an if statement right up there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we can just be like, if, player A equals R, or player A equals P, and then basically have all of our code sit in that if statement. So if it is one of these three, then the rest of it will run. Otherwise, you can display an error message and be like, you broke it. Try again.
Okay.
I personally didn't put in sort of error handling in this one. I've done it in other ones, but this one I got lazy with.
Yeah, no, it's fair. So it's a long assignment, right? Like it's a lot of, and it's like you say, that's the thing I find I get wrapped up in is I'm like, oh, I'm gonna like add this and add this. It was like that one we had talked about with you where I was trying to create the actual like weighted average interest rate for the question. You know what I mean? Like just trying to make it maybe a bit more than I need to sometimes, spending too much time on one.
Yeah. And I think breaking it down into its constituent parts is what makes it a lot easier and straightforward to not get caught up in like, oh, this would be really cool if I did this. But then, after you've reiterated it, it's like, no, it's only asking for this.
Simple. Yeah, it's simple.
And
seems less confusing, right?
Yeah. And I mean, going back to COMP120, the lecture today of like, keep it simple, right? Like follow the requirements. I think those are actually like quite valid and important things to keep in mind as we approach our work here. And obviously, we do it to the limits of our ability, right? Like I know for sure question 18 can be answered with an array, and you can like
there's different ways you can do it.
Yeah, you can add and drop elements from the array as you go and be like, oh, if whatever, and it would be like 30 lines of code versus the monstrosity if statement that I have. But I don't know how to do that, and I'm not going to invest the
research it
the X hours trying to figure it out. When I know that what I've done now works.
Well, and he's going to teach us that stuff later, so I think that's what he wants us to do, is more so reinforce these by practicing them so much
exactly
before he introduces the other stuff, which I do get, but it's just like, oh my goodness, keeping up is tricky.
Well, and it also like reinforces the tools that right? Like I can use an if statement now in my sleep. Because I've done like 80 of them across this assignment.
Well, it's funny. I told you about those two guys I know as programmers, and like I one time sent the one guy like a couple of my things, and it was funny. He corrected it in like literally a second, but also he was just like, you can write it in like 3 lines. Like he showed me how to write it in like 3 lines. I was like, I don't know what that means, but you could just, and he even said to me, he was like, both of them always say you have to code every day. Like that it's just one of those types of things that you can't do like every second day or twice a week and actually get good at. You got to do it all like every day.
Yeah, it's definitely like the brain is a muscle that we have to exercise, right? And I think like this breaking down statements into like logical processions is something that a lot of people haven't had the opportunity to practice.
It's foreign, right? Like that's the thing I notice. I enjoy it a lot, but I've never had to use this type of logic or like language to give instructions to anything before. Like I know it's based on math, but it's done with language. So it's definitely different.
So the last thing that I definitely want to encourage you guys, especially since you guys have kids, to think about this is break it into 2 different concepts, right? The first one is, how would you explain to your child how to do this? Right? Like, how would you teach your kid, your 5-year-old, how to play rock, paper, scissors? right? It's like, first you need to choose rock, paper, or scissors. Then I choose, actually, I mean, technically at the same time, I choose rock, paper, or scissors. And then these are the rules, you know, if we both have rock, then it's a tie. If you have rock and I have paper, then I win. And in very simple English terms, explain it to your toddler what the problem is doing. Or even like something like this, right? Write a console-based program that prompts the user for our hourly pay rate. To your child, you might be like, all right, I want to give me a number between, but any number that you want. And then I'm going to see if this number is less than 7.5. And if it's less than 7.5, I'm going to, bonk you on the head or whatever, right? So you have that logic broken out already. And then you can be like, all right, now I turn on my programming brain. How do I convert this logic into code? And from what I've heard and from what I've experienced, that's what really lets you become a stronger programmer, because you're separating the problem with the language, right? So like I've learned Python before. I've never learned C#. I had no idea how to do it. But the fact that I can break the problem into its component parts makes it so much easier, because then I can just be like, all right, what's the tool in
language,
in C#
how do I do
to
that
do
in
this?
that language or whatever,
like,
right?
Yeah, exactly. I just need to be like, all right, instead of I think in Python it's like print. Instead of print, happy, I just need to use console.write. So now in my brain, I can just be like, all right, every single time I wanted to say print in Python, I'm just going to do console.write. And then I can forget about like trying to figure out the logic as I go. And it's just, in my experience, it just makes it a lot easier to have broken that problem into the two separate parts.
And when you write in a question like you did here, you do those types of comment lines, and then you'd kind of fill code in between, eh? Like you come out with almost that plan right from the start.
It depends on the complexity. So some of them,
I usually I wrote section by section, you know what I mean? Like input. And then versus this, I think this is probably going to be a lot more helpful for me. Because then, like you say, it'll help me understand, like, where does this variable need to be declared? Where does this need to happen, that need to happen, versus kind of being like, where do I put this? Is it in my input? Is it in my processing?
Yeah. And like, I think as y'all get more experienced, it'll like the level of detail that you need to put in your process might change. Like this one, like write a console-based program. Like you don't really need to write think of like, all right, I need a number. It needs to be a float, and I just need to do a check if it's less than 750. And spits as an error, right? Like I can hold that concept in my head without writing out a comment.
It doesn't need a lot of comments to explain either, right?
Yeah.
Versus 18,
yeah, exactly. Whereas 18, like I literally had to
21 options right on a piece of paper, right?
Yeah, like I have a sheet of paper here next to me on my desk that has the 21 different permutations,
combinations,
written out, and like my code here is a lot more commented, because I needed to keep track of what the heck I'm trying to do. So yeah, that's kind of how I approach it, and the mentality that I try and take.
And how about the last part? How did you where it says make your application accommodate repeating digits?
Oh yeah, that's the really hard part. So
repeating.
Yeah, that's the really difficult part of this question. If this didn't exist, it would be a lot easier. I approached repeating digits as each digit is its own separate variable. So similar to how here we had, player A equals rock and player B equals rock. Think about it as if you're playing 3 different games of rock, paper, scissors, right? So now you have player A equals rock, checked versus player B equals rock. That's one. And then we have another one for our second number, player A equals rock and player B equals rock. And then we do it again for player C equals rock, or yeah, player A equals rock, sorry. And player B equals rock. And this would be, you know, instead of it being, oh my gosh, what's going on here? Instead of it being like player A equals player B, it'd be like, is num A equals num A? Is num B equals num B? Is num C equals num C? And you do that for each potential combination of, I calculated 21 options between the various things.
That just like makes me cringe because I'm on, like I say, like now I'm gonna skip to 9 and I'm still finishing the 120. I'm like, oh god.
And there's options to narrow it down. Because like if you think about it, if you've confirmed that, say if you've confirmed like your first user's number 1 is equal to is not equal to the generated the first, or sorry, the user number 1 is equal to the first generated number, then you no longer need to check if number 2, the user's number 2 is equal to generated number 1, because that generated number 1 is already taken. It's already been eaten by the first user choice. So there's efficiency that you can find there in terms of the if statements, but it's definitely a bit of a mental like.
Well, because I was gonna say the process of, like you say, to slim it down, it's like you recognize it almost after you've written it long. So to try and do it while you're writing it might be pretty confusing.
Yeah, which is why I did it on paper first. Like I found all the permutations and then I classified into like, okay, this is the flow for each of them.
Yeah.
But yeah, I have no idea if I approached it correctly. I did some testing. It looked like it worked, but yeah. We'll see. And and that's the other thing that I wanted to chat through, right? Like always make sure you test your code. All right. It should work.
I was gonna say, I know this week, I'm probably gonna submit a couple that won't, just because like I told you, I had that thing happen last week, but so far I haven't had to do that. And it's like I said to you, I think honestly, if you submit like 13 or 14 that work well, you show him another 4 or 5 that have good comments, he sees your logic, you'll still probably end up with an A. You know what I mean? Like,
well, and that's the thing, and I don't want to speak for Reza, but like if you've written out sort of your, I don't want to call it an IPO because it's not a true IPO, but you've written out your thought process of like, this is how I would explain to a 5-year-old how to do this. I just don't have the programming capability to do it.
Yeah. But this is how I tried, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of value in just doing that exercise, just for the mental exercise.
The way I see it is he's like, that's 90% of the mark, like a correct output.
Well, it's 90% of what you need to do as well.
Yeah.
Like if you have a good problem statement, you'll get, like, it's just a matter of figuring out the tools to execute.
Well, it's like you say, it's a more generalized skill that then you can take to any other language versus just thinking you're learning the language or how to just solve problems in that language. You're creating a nice structure that you could apply in any problem solving circumstance, basically.
Yep. Cool. So it is 12:30. So I've taken about an hour of your time already. I do need to have some food, but I do want to, give the option if there's any sort of burning questions on what we chatted through today, the approach, how I think through problems, all that fun stuff, feel free.
I think I'm good, but I did appreciate it. It was really useful. Hopefully our future ones will be more interactive and we won't just have you teach us.
It's all good.
I'm kidding.
I mean,
It's good for you.
anything from you?
It's good for you too.
It definitely is. I definitely makes me, think about it a little bit more.
Mhm.
Anything from your side, Amina?
No.
Cool. Alrighty. Then I'm gonna kill the recording, and hopefully it works. And I'll kill the screen share. Ooh, not this button. Stop share. And yeah, I will share this when I get it loaded onto YouTube with folks, and we'll go from there.
Sounds good.
Awesome. Thanks, folks.
Thanks, man.
Have a good one.
You too.